You're listening to a DM podcast.
Hello and welcome to Sportish, where we look at life through the lens of sport. I'm Libby Trickett.
And I'm Georgie Trickett, and we are absolutely thrilled to bring you our next guest.
Yes, this week in the studio we have Robyn Smith, CEO of Sport Inclusion Australia, board member on the International Paralympic Committee, Australian Sporting Alliance for People with a Disability, former chair and current board member, and member of the Brisbane 2032 Organising Committee.
Robyn is also part of the governing board of Virtus, which is the International Sport Federation for People with an Intellectual Disability. And with a bio like that, I'm not entirely sure how Robyn's fit us in this
I don't
morning.
know. I have no idea. Thank you so much for being with us, Robyn. Now, before we chat about your incredible career in sports accessibility, would just love to understand a bit more of your own personal relationship with sport. And did you play it when you were growing up?
Yeah, I did actually. I'm a netballer. So I was telling someone, one of the Sue Gordian, I don't know whether you know Sue, I saw Sue in a hotel room the other day, a hotel foyer, and I said my two passions remain netball and inclusion, so sport for all. I started as a netballer, and it was actually Sport Inclusion Australia was founded by a group of female netballers who also worked in social work. They got together and decided that they wanted netball to be available to people with a disability, intellectual disability. And so the organisation was founded, and I've been there almost as long as the organisation was founded, which is a bit sad, really. But
No, we were going to ask that because you've been there for 34 years. We kind of just assumed that you were part of the initial.
It's funny. Yeah, when you're, I started, I did a physical education degree, so I taught for a very short period of time, and then got this job. So literally I've worked in sport my whole life, and when you find something that I guess agrees with your values, that sport's a fantastic medium, as everyone knows, but then you can do it every day and you can help others access it. It's a nice little life.
Robyn, what drew you into that sport inclusion piece and specifically that intellectual disability inclusion aspect of sport?
I guess when I was studying, I had an interest in accessing, providing physical education to people with a disability, making sure that everyone could access it. Obviously been a very strong female advocate to make sure women can access sport at all levels. And I guess the values with my parents, very much helping those that can't help themselves, making sure that everyone can access different aspects of life through education, wherever it is. Just sort of resonated with me. And then these netball women knew I was looking for something and actually reached out. And it's funny because my husband unfortunately has passed away since, but back then I had applied for the job, the CEO role, and I was feeling sick, and I went to the doctor, and she said, "You're not sick, you're pregnant." And so I withdrew my role as the CEO and said, "Look, I'm pregnant." She said, "Don't you want the job?" Mari Little was the founder. There's now a national netball event that Netball Australia runs called the Mari Little Shield, but she said, "Oh, don't you want the job? You won't be discriminated in this organisation because you're female and pregnant." I told my husband goes, "Great words, but you're not getting that job." Anyway, long story short, I did get that job, and I guess I've had 3 children through having the job. They were incredibly accommodating, and then my husband was diagnosed with motor neurone disease in 2006, so they even supported me through all of that caring, that time. They've been incredible. So I think when you find something that just sort of resonates, as I said, with your values, it's easy to hang around. And I feel like they've given me the job, and the people that I've worked with have given me far more than I've given it.
That's incredible. I think, it's not often that you hear about, especially a job such as a CEO, where they're so accommodating through, that's always such a female thing, right? Oh, I'm about to have kids, or I'm having kids, I'm pregnant, I'm not going to apply for that job, I'm not going to go for it. That's an incredible testament to Sport Inclusion Australia, being inclusive at all levels,
Yeah,
for
person
women and
first.
obviously, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's amazing because what it's done, I've done that with my children. I've been able to do that with all the employees that I've been able to take on board, mostly females, funnily enough, but I've given them the time that they need to be with their children at school, doing the reading or drop off or pick up, and you get so much more out of people and not that I did it for that reason, but you just do, because you get flexibility in your workplace. They're very good at what they do, and they can still be very good mothers. So they do what they need to do in that space. And then, once the children have gone to bed, they're still working on budgets or programs or trying to deliver, because they've been given an opportunity to be the best they can be in their job, but it doesn't totally detract from them being good mothers.
Robyn, I'm really interested about the Maori Little Shield. We have actually interviewed a couple of girls, Lorelei and Olivia Page, who have had epilepsy that's created some intellectual impairment. And through the Maori Little Shield, they have had their first access to sport. And for them, it's been absolutely life-changing. Their family had never been able to do anything without the girls, and the girls had never travelled away from their family. And through that sporting competition, they travelled interstate, they made a broader group of friends, and now sport is a very real part of their lives. And I understand that Maori Little was one of your mentors. Can you tell us a little bit more about her?
I mean, what you've just said is music to my ears, to be honest. I mean, I still get pretty emotional about things like that, because we all know the power of sport in our own lives, to be able to give it to people that really haven't had an opportunity. And obviously with some parents, they're really struggling to make ends meet. It may be medical conditions. It may be being bullied and ostracised at school. And so they don't see sport. They're worrying about the next meal. They're worrying about certain education elements for their child to try and just keep their head above water. So when they find sport and all of a sudden these life skills are being taught, being on time, having the uniform ready, what is required in training, commitment, rules, all of those things. And I guess that was paramount in Maori Little's life. She started as a social worker. She lost her husband quite early. She had 4 children, worked that many jobs to put them through private school in South Australia. And then she was playing netball, and there were girls that she was working with in social work. She said, look, they said, we want to play Maori. And she said, oh, okay, well, and let's organise it. So they came along. She said the first time they came along, they had street shoes, lace-up street shoes, or they had no idea. And by being part of that club, and not special, not over there, but here at the same club that Mari was at, they soon learned what to wear. They went and supported the other girls in their club. They learned what to do at the canteen. They learned to catch public transport. All of those life skills that came with it. So, and she went over to listen to a Swedish philosopher called Bettineri, who believed in normalization. So if human beings had an opportunities, that they could often overcome many obstacles if the bar wasn't set low, if they just had an opportunity to reach for the stars. So she came home and felt that was something that she could do with sport, and hence started up the South Australian Agency of Sport Inclusion Australia. And back then it was called AusRapid. And she did a lot of it on her own, and then through Netball Women, as I mentioned, set up a state and territory group in each of those states and territories, and then they formed the national body, and that was when I became involved. But she was very much a person first, certainly female promoter. And when I started, and they said, oh, I was young, and they were all, it's the good cop, bad cop, because Murray had to do a lot of the hard work, and a lot of the answers in those days were no. And she never took no as an answer. And I know some of our international colleagues in the early 90s, they said to Mari, don't you employ men? Because it was Mari and I, and she said, no, I haven't found a good one yet in Australia. So, yeah. So she was really she was a force. She was a pioneer. I know with the Australian Paralympic Committee at the time, she was on the board. She was the first female president of that board. And she really wanted sport to own sport. So she drove that really strongly with swimming and athletics and a range of other sports that previously had sort of been owned by carers or coaches that didn't have that level of expertise. So she really pushed hard for sport to own sport. So it was really nice to follow her through the jungle as she broke down everything, just walk through the path behind her. We lost her in 2014, and honestly, it was a huge honour that the netball event, rightly so, was called the Murray Little Shield in 2012, and she was able to attend the 2012 version, the 2013 version, and then she actually died the final day of the Murray Little Shield in 2014. So it was like super uncanny. I spoke for her and then found out an hour later that she'd passed away that day. So, but yeah, we're pioneers like that. And she was also the first female ever to be on the International Paralympic Committee governing board, obviously an Australian. And so, yeah, the next Australian female was me many years later. So it was sort of nice. Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's so inspiring hearing women just take control of the situation. I find that quite inspiring. Like you see something that needs to be changed and then you go out after it and don't take no for an answer. I find that just so empowering. Following the work,
just one more thing about it is that one of the beautiful things about that, she was a really strong female. Attention to detail was uncanny, but she also had 4 kids and then a heap of grandkids, and she was so involved in all of that. She'd make jam with them, she'd roll in the autumn leaves with them. She was so family orientated, so she just proved that you can be good at all of it.
Following Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games, it was revealed by an undercover journalist that 10 out of 12 players from the gold-winning Spanish basketball team had faked an intellectual impairment. Can you tell us about how that unfolded and the impact that had on disability sport, and particularly disability sport pathways for those with an intellectual disability?
So I was in Sydney. I was assistant chef de mission for the Australian Paralympic team. I was in charge of operations. So I outfitted the 435 team. So that's athletes and staff. And 30 of those had an intellectual impairment. So my paid work was looking after that and making sure their eligibility was in place. They were selected. And so, I had a much bigger remit in Sydney, but my heart was there with those 30 athletes. So when it all unfolded, not long afterwards, our men were obviously playing in the basketball. And, I know they were all genuine, and we had them retested again, which was a waste of space from my perspective, but they were definitely eligible. It unfolded, and I don't think it's 10. I would dispute that greatly. I know there were 2 degree qualified men playing for Spain, and there was a journalist that from the Spanish media played as well, and he uncovered it. So, it was wrong. There was definitely fraud involved, but it wasn't the movement as such, and it wasn't all the athletes. And so I think there was 175 athletes in Sydney with an intellectual impairment, and I guess the hurt was quite incredible because sometimes the traits of someone with a cognitive impairment is they don't always understand the abstract. And so I had many calls when I went back to work saying, we didn't cheat, we don't understand why we can't compete anymore. We didn't do anything wrong, and it was really tough. And it was we tried hard to go through the right channels to use examples where if a cyclist or if someone is found to take drugs or do the wrong thing, they don't shut down the Tour de France. They don't even shut down the team that athlete's in. So we were just really struggling to understand why the whole movement lost their way, and so we were banned. But we went through the right channels. Obviously, the culprit was arrested for a period of time on other fraud charges. He was a Spanish person, and at the time he was heavily involved at the top level of Virtus. So it was a bit murky. But the difficulty was that all those genuine athletes had a very long period of time where they were in the wilderness, and they didn't quite understand. Some of them were a bit bitter, but even not many of our athletes get bitter. They just didn't understand. So, Siobhan Payton won 6 gold medals in Sydney 2000, and went on to be the Paralympian of the Year. And then within a month or two, she was again in the wilderness. So she didn't understand. And I think a lot of people saw everyone was cheating when it just wasn't the case. It wasn't the whole movement. So to be fair to the IPC, the process is very rigorous now, and it's checked over, and Virtus works very, very closely with the IPC to make sure that every athlete that's represented is checked and double-checked and rechecked, and to avoid that ever happening again. So, but yeah, it was a very difficult period to work through.
It must be, because you've worked at all levels of sport, from the very top elite level all the way through to grassroots. What do you think, obviously I can't even imagine how devastating that would be for those athletes to have that pathway taken away from them. Following the work that you and Mari Little did to fight for the re-inclusion of people with an intellectual disability into Paralympic sport, what sports can intellectual disability athletes compete in now that they weren't able to?
Before, right. So we probably work with about 22 here in Australia. So swimming was one of the first ones in 1991 that we worked with, athletics, tennis and basketball. Each of those sports have events at their national events. It's not a specialised program, it's their events. There's a range of sports here in Australia. Virtus there's 15 sports that they can compete at internationally, and then at the Paralympic pathway, there's athletics, swimming, and table tennis. But I'm heading off to Geneva tonight to meet with the International Federation of Ski and Snowboard. So I've got everything crossed that they'll be looking at a winter re-inclusion for 2030. And going off to FIBA. So FIBA will be Wednesday, meeting in the offices at Mies in Switzerland to talk to the FIBA Wear for All, because Virtus is hoping that 3-on-3 will be considered for inclusion in 2032 here in Australia. So we're constantly pushing, and it's a matter of, I guess, since I've been sitting on the International Paralympic Committee governing board, I understand the machinations and the processes which, before sitting on Virtus, you didn't always know the full what you had to do, and sometimes wishful thinking doesn't get it done. So now that we understand what has to be done, trying to combine meetings in Germany with a couple of days in Switzerland to see if we can just meet and talk about what's fair and what we have to do as an organisation to make athletes be able to reach their pinnacle. And as you know, probably, and it's fantastic that those two women you've met with the Murray Little Shield and everything that goes with it, sometimes people from that walk of life don't always understand what good looks like. And as I mentioned, some parents are struggling just to keep their heads above water, and sport's sometimes the last thing they think is as a solution. But what we're proving is that it is, and it gives them confidence, and they get full-time employment, and they've come and spoken to you on a podcast, and they feel empowered, I think was the word you used. And so we just need to impart that to more of these sport people, because once you hear it, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. If you know your sport can actually change lives, you're happy to be involved. Sometimes it's just what they don't know. And then from the group that we represent is they don't always know what good looks like. And also they don't know who to speak to on how to use their voice. So there's a whole range of balls that need to be in the air. And it is important to listen for sure, but sometimes you just have to keep pushing like Murray did, and not accept no, and just keep going, because the group of people that Sport Inclusion Australia represents deserve it.
But even at the grassroots level, what do you think is that power of sport? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but like for those athletes who kind of haven't necessarily connected yet to sport, what is that power that you've seen and the change that you've seen in these young people?
I think it's about getting people like you two and people out in the community to just accept person first, and the power of being able to go to your local club. And sometimes I use tennis. In Australian sport, if you drive up to the tennis club in a bright, shiny Merc or Mercedes-Benz, if you can't play tennis, that's where you fit in that particular set. It's not sport is quite discerning and doesn't care how much money you have. It's all about sport and being involved. And I think anyone, especially Australians, anyone that loves sport and sees someone else love sport is very engaging and open-armed about, what is it I can do? Sometimes they take on picking them up and dropping them off. They get them involved in volunteers. I mean, we're not always talking necessarily about people with a disability being involved as participants. Sometimes we're just asking them to be a member of the club, have a beer at the end of the game like everybody else, or be a volunteer, or run water, or do statistics. Some of our athletes with their autism are very good at statistics. So it's just, I guess it's finding connection point. And because schooling doesn't provide it, I just had 3 athletes speak at the Festival of Sport in South Australia a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't preempt anything. And all 3 talked about how hard school was and how they were bullied and they just hated school. But when they found sport, they found a platform, an area where they can go into other aspects of their life and feel stronger and more worthwhile and valued. And there's, we all know, the people here today know what it's like. If you find a connection point and you feel valued, you can be successful. But if you're totally marginalised, you don't leave your house, no one values you, talks down to you, bullies you, whatever it is, then it's difficult. And I'm absolute advocate that sport can provide all those things from local, and all we're trying to create at Sport Inclusion Australia is a normalised environment, whereas we all want kids to do school at sport, and I'm sure you all 8 kids all do it and heavily engaged in something, and maybe a range of things, so they find something they really love to do. And then if they're any good, they go to the next level. If they're any good, they go to the next level. And if they're any good, they represent their country. And I guess that's the normalised process that we're trying to create, and not tokenistic and not patronising, but it allows, I always talk about, for so long the lid's been on things. So we're trying to lift the lid and allow people to reach the stars with no barriers in terms of that. And sometimes barriers, people see a barrier as a ramp or a lift, but barriers sometimes can be expectations. So we're just trying to help community, and it's far better at grassroots sport to have that occur, because people usually, because as I said, when they love their sport, they're happy to see other people love their sport, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter what gender you are, what colour you are, how tall you are, how good you are. If you love the sport and you've got a shared passion, sometimes that's what helps people through.
We have absolutely loved watching athletes like Annabelle Coleman, Jack Ireland and Talayla Blacksmith in Paris. Their performances were phenomenal. And speaking about that pathway, can you tell us a bit more about the role that something like the Virtus Global Games provides for them? Is that pathway development for these athletes?
It is for those athletes. They've all come through our pathway. But for the athletes where there's no Paralympic pathway, it's the top of the top. Yeah. So if you're the world record holder in hammer throw, then Virtus is your pathway. Yeah. Because there's no hammer throw in the games. And I know, sitting on the IPC governing board, that there's 4,500 slots. And if something comes into the games, something has to go out of the games. So it's just not an open-ended, and not every disability type, not every sport is going to be able to be there at that pinnacle, unfortunately. It'd be great if they were, but they're not. And the same goes for the Olympics. I mean, there's just, for Sydney 2032, there's a set limit, and that's costed, and that's what the IOC is providing. And so therefore it doesn't fluctuate too much. So Virtus Pathways often can, for most, provide, that's the top of the top. So for athletes like Jack, we found Jack, he was in school sport. He was swimming and being coached under a really good coach. We struggled to get him to do some video chats. And in about March last year, the IPC asked each of the governing board which medals events would we like to present medals at. And of course, I picked events where I had everything crossed, that some of our athletes would prevail. And of course, Jack got a bronze. So I happened to be there at pool deck presenting him a medal in Paris, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But one of the things, it was really difficult in early days to get him to talk to camera. And when I walked downstairs, and as you know, the swimming, there was lots of, they were all on different ramps and all the different bits and pieces behind the scenes. And I walked in and he said, "Are you presenting my medal, Robyn?" You could have knocked me off with a feather, that he was so eloquent and clear and concise. And yeah, so it was for me, it was a huge highlight in my working career to be able to present him a medal and see the huge journey he's come on. And also that the Swimming Australia, the advertising for the Nationals last year, got Emma McKeon, our most prolific Olympic gold medalist, and Jack on the other side. And I've shown that all around the world to say inclusion matters. And sometimes all the detail behind the scenes doesn't matter as much, but the fact that he's got an opportunity to be there opposite Emma, advertising the Nationals, and just advertising what's possible. That's really powerful.
It's something that I'm really proud of swimming. I mean, I'm very biased towards swimming anyway, but I feel particularly proud of the way that we as a sport have really, I think, elevated,
embraced it. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've really embraced the athletes with a disability and the para athletes, and we're seeing it so much more. Like, it started just with integrating a few events, and now we're integrating way more events into the schedule, and we're televising it. We've got Ellie Cole presenting on pool deck the entire, para team that are heading off to the World Championships. Like, what is it that other sports can learn? Because I feel like swimming's really leading the charge here. Yeah, it's one of the best. What can other sports do to really help elevate these incredible athletes and what they're doing in their sports?
Look, to be fair to many of the NSOs, I mean, the Sports Commission's leading the way. You've got a federal sport minister that cares so much about the Paralympic area, and making sure that people can be seen and have, like we talked about, a normalised pathway to whatever level that it is they reach. Swimming's done well. Swimming has also been on a journey. You'll know yourself that the events were often before the televised program started.
Or during the ads, often.
And so now being integrated, what that does is it showcases and highlights. And so it becomes, again, I use the word normalised, but it normalises it. So other sports that might be on the edge, not sure, it just normalizes it. So when they're watching the swimming, they go, "Oh, we could do that." It's sometimes some of the hard noses, and there's not too many these days, but there used to be. I was one of the first female CEOs in sport. Wasn't easy, and there's still not anywhere near enough, I've got to say, but it's getting better. But I often go to them and say, "Don't you want their money?" Because these people pay. They buy the uniforms, they buy the kit, they pay for coaching, they have memberships in the pools or the gyms or whatever it is, and they become long life fans, because the minute they get valued and respected, sometimes it's hard to shake them, and they're really loyal. So I think the swimming model just shows to other sport, to the community at large, what's possible, and even the media, Libby. I mean, the media sees that it connects. And I think the Paralympic movement, the essence of what the Paralympic movement is about, is really, if we could bottle it, if we could bottle the and I worked on the uniform in this is no disrespect, but I worked on the uniform in 2000 with Nike. And the fellow in charge of Nike at the time, he did all the processing for the Olympics, and then he did all the processing for the Paralympics with me. And he just said to me, "Oh my God, I've never had so many thank yous in this half."
Yeah.
He said they're overwhelmed by what they're getting, and so he went on to be the Nike man at Manchester United overseas, and there was an article in The Age written about what the Paralympic movement represents, the essence of humanity, and what just overcoming adversity, prevailing, excellence, sure, but when you're an athlete and you realize what they've had to overcome, whether it's biomechanics, whether it's reaction times, whatever it is, to prevail, you actually have an added respect for what they're achieving. And I think, anyway, he found this article in The Age written, and he sent it to me from the UK, telling me that this is what he was trying to say to me, that the essence of it, and I can't write, he cut it out and sent it to me, and I cut it out and put it on my office wall. But the essence of is that the games, the Paralympic Games and what it represents provides so much more to us as a country than we provide to it. And so once you're inclusive, and you know that from being female leaders, once you're inclusive of gender, it's not what you're doing for females to give them a chance. It's actually what they bring to you, and what it brings to society to have both sides of the fence represented. And we know as nurturers, as we see things slightly differently, and that's always going to be beneficial to sport to do that. And I feel exactly the same about the Paralympic movement. It can bring so much more to sport than they currently have. And I think that's the models that swimming can show. Tennis has done a magnificent job. Craig Tiley's been incredible with the Australian Open. And so, yeah, it's those sports that lead the way to just help others gently come with them.
Robyn, what do you think the opportunities are with Brisbane 2032 for not just the Paralympic movement, but for broader inclusion within sport in Australia?
Australia, yeah, look, everything. Sydney 2000 was a standing in the Olympic Park, and we'd done so much pre-work with schools to try and get people to come to the games, and you couldn't move. My husband and his three, and our three children, should I say, came up to spend some time. I'd been gone for so long processing, and we couldn't get tickets to swimming. I had to sneak them in the back door to get to watch the para swimming because tickets were just sold out. So it was a turning point for respect and value of the Paralympic movement. I'm hoping 32 just goes to another level. I'm hoping that, sure, people will come. I've got many international colleagues, and this is no disrespect to Brisbane, but people say, where is it? And I'm like, seriously? So
I'll know soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the smallest city since 1952 to ever host an Olympic or Paralympic Games. So there's lots to do, but I believe the Games will show off our friendliness. Once people see Queensland, for heaven's sakes, it'll be a revelation to many tourists. And I hope that many people speak about how the volunteers were in Sydney, how friendly people were, how people went out of their way. So I hope we can go to another level. I already know that we'll go to another level, our own team and our own acceptance of the Paralympic area. But I just hope we're really good citizens, and we know that these are Oceania Games. So it's not just about us. Speaking to some key people in Paralympics Australia today, that we have a responsibility to make sure that the people with a disability in our region have some sort of access. And it's not about the shiny equipment. It's just basic opportunity to even have a chance to get where they need to go. So that one of the titles for Legacy is the most diverse and inclusive games ever. So I'm absolutely confident we're on the right track, and very proud of both the board and the management and what they're doing at the moment. There was many of them in Paris, and so they were looking at both, obviously, the Olympics, but there were many of them at the Paralympics, going to all the venues, speaking to people, looking at transport. And as you know, Paris was brilliant considering some of the infrastructure that's been there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So, and also I'm hoping that it's led by gender, Indigenous, or First Nations. We've got a chance to elevate that story. Obviously, people with a disability, and so we're far more engaging. And like you said, the word embrace, we can embrace as many of our citizens as possible, and they see the Games apostrophe as a catalyst or a starting point rather than a finishing point, that we see the power of sport and physical activity to be engaged. They can be volunteers, they can be whatever they want to be, but sport can play that role. So,
Robyn, I am very conscious that you're about to head off to Geneva. And once again, thank you so much for all of your generosity of time. I think one of the question that I'd like to kind of finish our conversation with, because Georgie and I are so passionate about the fact that sport is not just the participation of it. You can work in it. There are so many layers to the work, whether it's sports administration or volunteering or coaching. There are so many ways to be involved. And I would love to know from someone who has, really led the charge for women in sport at that top level of sports administration. What advice would you give to women who are looking to get involved in the business of sport and wanting to be an advocate such as yourself?
Look, I think you talked about it earlier. I think women, if women had an attribute that was perhaps not in favour of them, is that they always think they won't get the job. They always think that they're, that's not appropriate. I couldn't do that. Now, I think as some of the makeup in men, they don't think that. They just go for it. And I think women should just go for more and more. I think they should be seeking experience. If they've got an opportunity to combine some volunteer work, get on local, I use my netball charges here. I live in country Victoria, and I'm constantly encouraging the young girls I coach to go on the board or do jobs, be the best they can be the whole time, but gain that experience. So, because one of the things I know back when I started was, these females don't have the experience. Well, hello. How do you get the experience without getting involved? So I think women just going out and volunteering their time in different aspects and learning different aspects just gives them that confidence. And obviously, I think one of the things women have faced as well is they've had children. There's a period of time, your mother's, probably my mother, they stop for 10 years or so, and they feel like they just totally dropped the ball. So when they go back, they feel, I've lost everything. When yourself, it takes 5 minutes to pick it back up, but it's just overcoming that negative or doubt, not negative feelings, but doubt in themselves. And just got to believe in ourselves. We've got to believe that we can do it, put ourselves forward, and they can only say no, but they certainly can't say no if we don't put ourselves up for these different positions.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a brilliant way to end this, Robyn. Thank you so much for your incredible contribution to sport in Australia and for creating such incredible pathways for everybody to be involved in sport. We're so grateful that we've been able to have this conversation and share it more broadly with our audience. Thank you again.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And good on you for just bringing these stories to people, because it's sharing stories is the way we're going to be better.
We totally agree. Thank you, Robyn.
No, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Sportish. We love having these chats with
so inspiring,
with such amazing guests. Gosh, it's been fun to have these incredible people in with us.
I feel very lucky that we get to do this.
And I feel people like Robyn, we should all know her name. We should all know the incredible legacy that she has created for inclusive sport in Australia. I think that's...
And for women.
Yeah.
Like, she's just like leading the path.
I agree. I just don't think we see enough attention put on women like Robyn who are doing incredible things in sport. So please keep an eye out.
Share, like, subscribe.
Share it away. Follow us on the socials. We'll have more great guests coming up. We'll also throw in a couple of our regular chats because...
So much is happening in F1.
My gosh, we are missing... talking about all the regular sports
enhanced
things.
Games.
Oh my goodness. There's just so much.
So much. But we will talk to you next week.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
We would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the traditional owners of the land we record this podcast on, the Yagara and Turrbal people,
and their continued connection to the land and waterways on which we meet.
This episode of Sportish is brought to you by the Australian Sporting Alliance for People with a Disability and
Sport Inclusion Australia.